organized by our chapter, co-organized by the World Affairs Council of the Inland Empire of Southern California. I want to introduce our board members, all those who are present here, our past presidents of our Kamalanda chapter. They will kindly stand. Dr. Salam, he's our interim director of our 5 International Conference, which is housed at Cal State San Bernardino. We are very lucky to have him, Dr. John Winstead, our former president, outgoing 13th president, and Dr. Arthur Conception, and Dr. Amy Lee, right, our treasurer of our chapter. So I did I miss anyone? Okay, so we welcome you all. Thank you, sir. I'm very excited and very happy that today we have a very special guest with us of honor, Consul General Raife Gulru Gezer. I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong. The Consul General of Turkey of Los Angeles. And I also want to welcome our President, Associate Vice President Professor Rong Chen, for coming to this particular event. Thank you, sir. I also want to welcome our Vice President of Student Affairs, Dr. Brian Haynes. Thank you, sir. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome our Faculty Director of International Programs, Professor Arturo Gilbert. This is one of my former students, he said, Heron, right? He brought he's my former student, and he's brought a bunch of students from his Victor Valley College. So really welcome them all to the Model UN team. And I also want to welcome all the members of the campus, the World Affairs Council, the Inland Empire, the teachers who are here, the World Affairs Council, and some of my students also who are sitting here. Welcome you guys all here. Education and awareness is very significant and important. And being a geographer, I just remember one of the quotations that I really have to say, and I do teach that in my human geography classes: space and separation leads to differentiation. We're all different countries living at different places, and this differentiation leads to disequilibrium. I don't know if I hug is a good gesture or feel bad. That is very important to understand. And this disequilibrium can only be resolved by spatial interaction, meeting people, right? So this is a great opportunity today that we have our Consul General with us, who's going to talk about the Middle East and Turkey and the Middle East refugee crisis in such an important time of the world, what we are going through. I want to talk briefly about our Gamalanda chapter. This is a high-profile international honor society on our campus, which focuses the community attentions on international education. We hold various events, right? One of the events is this. We have 3 events in the whole year. We have a fall banquet, we have a winter banquet, and we also have a spring scholarship dinner. At each event, we always invite speakers of international fame and of international interest, which is really going on in the world today. We also raise funds for scholarship for international students today. And I'm pretty excited to share this news and becoming the 14th president of this chapter. When I was a grad student at Kent State, Ohio, and I remember I got a 4.0 GPA, and there was a Phi Beta Delta chapter at Kent State University, and they said, okay Raj, you got a certificate and medallion. I said, what did I do? Oh, you got a 4.0 GPA. So I'm connected with this particular organization when I was a grad student. So I do have memories of that, and it's very significant. So we also have international scholars who are visiting our university from around the world, including student, faculty, Fulbright scholars, and you all can become one of them too, one of our students. And as I said to you earlier, we have our annual conference coming up on 3rd and 4th June. And as I said, we are very lucky actually that our national conference headquarters are housed at Cal State San Bernardino. And we have our interim director with us, Professor Salam Yusuf. So that's very interesting. You know, if you're interested in participating in that International Education Conference, we are co-sponsoring with NAFSA. This is going to be in Denver, and I'm pretty honored to be the conference coordinator for that particular conference too. And we have a very interesting journal. It's a peer-reviewed journal, so we publish papers too in the matters of international education with 7 issues per year. And we get sizable donations for establishment of new endowed funds. So you're welcome to, donate. And this financial pool has really played an important role for funding our international and domestic students, those who are really interested in studying abroad. So now I really want to invite Dr. Margaret Hill, who is the director of the World Affairs Council, and we have been pretty busy. She has been pretty busy today with the Turkey Day celebrations, and I know many of you were a part of it. She will introduce and tell us more about the WBC. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm really pleased to see so many young faces and community and university staff together, because that's what the partnership with the Phi Beta Delta is all about. World Affairs Council is a national organization of community associations that have an interest in learning about international issues. Like it's a continuing education kind of thing for the community. And there's 97 of them or something nationally, and the World Affairs Council of Inland Southern California is celebrating its 50th anniversary, just like this university is. So we grew up together, is the point. And the partnerships with various groups in the community have made it work. And the Phi Beta Delta is one of the strongest organizations for international education in the entire inland area, and we hope to be a partner with that. And we're looking at issues that are of international importance. We work with business issues this morning for our region, partnerships with Turkey on that. So welcome tonight, and we will have a little special little bit now. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we are, as I said, we are really very honored. Consul General Gezer is here with us. I want to go right? So I've been an Asian Indian, when I got this name of your Gulru, I said Gul means rose, right? And in Hindi we call Gulab. Gulab is roses. Wow, now I can't forget this name, Gulru. Gezer, right? So I really want, we have a surprise for you. We want to make you an our honorary member of our Gamalaka chapter. So I would really invite Yusuf, our interim director of our national organization, to read our aims and objectives.
You will continue it so that everybody will get to hear you. Actually, we just had an hour-long meeting with the Consul General, and we touched upon ideas of collaboration and cooperation between our university and Turkish university. So this is kind of part of the objectives of our society. So our goals are to recognize the scholarly achievement of international students and scholars, faculty and staff who are involved in international activities, to serve as a vehicle for the development of academic-based international programming, curriculum and so forth, study abroad programs, to provide a network on each campus of faculty, staff, and students involved in international endeavors, and to extend this network to thousands of members in chapters throughout the world. So if you are not already a member, be a member. Thank you.
Come here on the stage, please. Thank you. I, Rajrani Khalra, in my capacity as the 14th President of the Gamalanga Chapel at Bernardino, hereby install you as an honorary member with full privileges in the ambition and aspirations of Phi Beta Delta, the Honor Society for International Scholars. I confirm your honorary membership based on the affirmation of your interest in the initiatives and conduct of international scholarship, locally and nationally, and on the basis of the confidence invested in you by the governing body of Gamma Lambda Chapter at California State University, San Bernardino, in their certification that you qualify for honorary membership under the established criteria of the society. Welcome, Consul.
I did want to mention one more thing, though, because we have some other guests here tonight that are part of the events that happened today. I don't know whether you saw the dancers, but we had a couple of our performers that were over in the theater who really member of a Turkish community organization. And in San Diego, it's a very strong group, and they drove all the way up here to work with us, and I thank you very much. I also wanted to introduce 5 teachers who were selected from our region and World Affairs Council this past year. In February, we had an event which was a training a cultural, history, arts, all of that kind of thing for educators from throughout the region, and we did it here at Cal State using the professors here, and there were 5 teachers from that group that were selected to participate in a summer travel study by the foundation, Turkish Cultural Foundation and the World Affairs Association of Councils of America. Okay, so it was they selected. We submitted everybody's name who gave us an application, but they were the ones who selected. And these teachers then went to Turkey for 2 very hard weeks, and it was a kind of a cross between a tour and a diplomatic kind of experience. So would you stand? Anita Tucker, Sherry Saucedo, Cameron Sanchez, Stacy Maxim, and Mike Madruga. And they're the ones who produced these exhibits that they shared with people today, and they also had a slide film show in the other room. And what I was told today, I presented your names, and you will be inducted into the Phi Beta Delta at the February meeting. All right, we took a long time, and I'm sorry with looking at your salads there, but now it's time to eat, and we'll take about 45 minutes to do it, and then we'll come back together and start the introductions and our really terrific talk we're going to have tonight about the refugee issues in the Middle East. Thank you. Our speaker.
On a side note, I see a few additional problem solvers out there as well as I look out and see our esteemed faculty, staff, and guests. On behalf of President Morales, who could not join us tonight, he's at the Board of Trustees meeting, distinguished CSUSB staff and faculty, the Gamma Lambda chapter of Phi Beta Delta, and the World Affairs Council of the Inland Southern California area, I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's event. And I think we should give our sponsors another round of applause for this excellent program tonight. As Dr. Hill mentioned, I am Dr. Brian Haynes, Vice President for Student Affairs here at CSUSB. I have the pleasure of introducing our distinguished guest tonight. Born in Istanbul, the Consul General began her career in 2000 as an editor at the International News Department of the NTV News Channel. In 2002, she joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Turkey in the European Union Political Affairs Deputy Directorate, where she became Second Secretary. In 2007, she was posted to the Turkish Embassy in Damascus, and then in 2009 was sent to the Turkish Permanent Representation to the EU. Returning to Ankara in 2010, she was appointed as the Chief of Cabinet of the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. After serving for 4 years in Ankara, she was appointed as a Consul General of Turkey to Los Angeles, assuming duties in September 2014. The CSUSB community is thrilled to have someone of this caliber and distinction here on our campus. Please join me in welcoming the General Counsel of Turkey for Los Angeles, Raife Gezer, to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming here tonight. CSUSB, thank you for the very warm welcome. Margaret from World Affairs Council of the Inland Empire, thank you so much for organizing this day-long event. I know you're tired. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be talking about a topic that is unfortunately not a very light topic to discuss during dinner. But it's a very important topic, and it's in the news. And when we were discussing with Margaret, we thought that we I would elaborate on the refugee crisis, particularly in Syria, because I see in this part of the world, particularly here on the West Coast, most people don't know what's going on. Or they read in the newspapers, and because they don't have the background information, they don't really understand what's going on. They don't know how to interpret what's going on in Syria, which also has an effect on what's going on in Iraq and in the Middle East, because everything in the Middle East is related to one another. You know, when after I left Syria, serving 2 years in Syria, what I thought of was that just when you get what is happening in the Middle East, suddenly you notice that you have no idea what's going on. Because the Middle East is an area of shifting alliances. I can be very good friends with you, and you can be my arch enemy. The next day, we're very good friends with you, and she's our arch enemy. I love you both very much. So it's very complicated to comprehend. My slide today, it's you're going to see, it's mostly photos. Actually, I'm going to start with the latest slide in order to give you some information about Syria and why there's actually a refugee crisis. You can see they're all photos. I know that you ate and you ate the chocolate cake and it's getting late. I don't want you guys to sleep. So let's start, thank you. Let's start from here. Now, this is current day Syria. You see that ISIS, which is a menace to the whole world today, ISIS is dominant in the black zone. You see the rebels, or the moderate opposition, in green, the PYD, which is the Kurdish group that is fighting against ISIS, and the Assad regime. And the gray area is mainly the desert area. Now, in 2010, Well, when the Arabs, I don't like using the phrase Arab Spring because I don't think it's a spring anymore, but when let's say, turmoil in the Middle East started, you know, it started in Tunisia, went on to Libya, where Gaddafi was, you know, he was overthrown, and then it went to Egypt, Mubarak was overthrown, and then of course you also started seeing some uprisings in Syria. I remember when we were discussing with our American colleagues, they used to say, you know, it's not a matter of weeks, it's a matter of days that Assad is going to go. Because if Gaddafi left in Libya, if Mubarak left in Egypt, of course Assad is going to leave. Well, we still see today that Assad is in power. He is a leader that has lost his legitimacy because he is, I don't want to call him a leader, he's officially still the president of the Syrian Arab Republic, but he is also a dictator that has used force against his own citizens. And because there has not been a comprehensive political solution, and because there has not been a peaceful transition, we are still seeing a civil war in Syria. The population of Syria, when I left Syria, was 21 million. Today, currently, over 4 million people live outside Syria. There are just about that many IDPs, which are internally displaced people. And most of them are living in dire straits. Now, of course, when there is an ongoing conflict in your country, when there is no security, what do? You flee from your country. So, okay, I have to go back now. So that's why, and another thing, what I read in the newspapers here is that people tend to address this issue as it just happened. This is an issue that has been ongoing for the past 5 years. This is I wanted to put this on the first slide. This is a refugee in Turkey, a small kid. She has made a doll out of a stick and some thread, but she's still smiling because she's a kid and she doesn't know what's really going on. But one day she will grow up and she will understand the trauma that her country, her nation, her people, her family have gone through. Now, Antonio Guterres, the United Nations High Commissioner of Refugee, the Commissioner for Refugees, he has said that Syria has become the great tragedy of the century, which is true. If you look at, these are UNHCR numbers, data. If you look at how the displaced people, forcibly displaced people have evolved in the past nearly 10 years. You see that in 2005, there were 37.5 million people. Today, for the first time ever in humankind's history, it's 59.5 million people, highest ever in our history. As I've said, when the conflict erupted, it started in 2012, slowly people started leaving Syria, the Syrian people. Today we have currently around 4 million Syrians living outside of Syria. And here you can see how they are dispersed around. You can see that these are also not only Syrians, but those who have forcefully been displaced from their country and where they are allocated at the moment. Now you can see the currently it's 2.2 million, but I couldn't find a up-to-date map showing the figures. So Turkey, of course, has today 2.2 million refugees. Iraq has 200, it's around 300 now. Jordan has, as you can see, 629,000 more than. And Lebanon has 1.1 million Syrian refugees. What do we provide? You can see Turkey. We provide basic needs and services, education, food security, health, livelihood, protection, shelter, and of course sanitation wash. You can see how the countries are trying to help the Syrian refugees. Now, if you look at the main migration routes, we used to say route in the past, now suddenly Americans are starting to say route, I don't know why. When I grew up here, it was Route Now's route. So main migration routes, you see that from East Africa and Eastern Mediterranean green, how they are moving towards Europe. Suddenly Europe has awakened to the refugee crisis. As I said, that has been going on for the past 5 years. Now, if we look around the world to the major refugee-hosted countries, Turkey is at #1, Pakistan, Lebanon, Iran, Ethiopia, Jordan, Kenya, Chad, Uganda, and China. If you compare the population, then of course Lebanon has a population of nearly 5 million, so they have 1 million Syrian refugees, so that's 1 out of every 5 person living in Lebanon is a refugee, and they also have a lot of Palestinians, so that increases the percentage. We have a population of over 75 million, so compared to the population, it's of course. As I said, you can see here, this is the map of Lebanon, the population and the Syrian refugees. Now, what has Turkey done? From the beginning, as I said, I'm going to turn and look at my notes, because I'm not good at numbers. We have pursued an open door policy towards the Syrian people because we see them as our brothers and our sisters. And we think that it's important to acknowledge all the difficulties that they are going through because today it's happening to them. Who is to guarantee that tomorrow it's not going to happen to us? So, as I said, we have currently 2.2 million Syrian refugees. We have 25 temporary protection centers in 10 of the provinces on the border. 4 out of the 25 temporary protection centers, we house Christians and the Yazidis. There are 10 refugee camps for Kurds from Kobani, as well as Arabs, Christians, and Yazidis run by the municipalities. Until now, we've had 9 million medical consultations and 280,000 surgical operations conducted for the Syrians in Turkey. Every day, 87 Syrian babies are born in Turkey. 5,600 Syrians are treated in hospital or polyclinics each day. 78,425 school kids and 7,368 kindergarten children receive education in Turkey. Last year, when the PYD, the Kurds in Syria, when they were fighting against ISIS, we were delivering at the 0 point of the border trucks full of assistance, humanitarian aid to the Kurds that were fighting there. And during the 2 weeks period where there was the heavy fighting, 197,000 Kurds crossed the border. Last year when I was here today during lunch, someone asked me about, she said, well, how do you think the newspapers here in the States interpret or explain what's going on in the Middle East? Well, I said, well, you know, some of the happenings, incidents are explained, but some of them are avoided for one reason or the other. And when I first arrived here last year, you know, the main, on the first page of the newspapers, you were seeing, you know, the Kurdish fighters fighting against ISIS, and they were saying, you know, Turkey from the other side of the border is just watching the Kurds die. No, actually, during that period, the Turkish army, the forces were training the Peshmerga in northern Iraq, and Turkish Airlines was transporting them to the 0 point of border so that they could go and fight with their brethren. But this was not in the news, unfortunately. You can see here, these are the camps that we have for the Syrians. Prefabricated houses. We want them to have to live in dignity. But of course, regardless of, even if you provide them a palace, they're away from their house and they don't know when they're going to return back. The other day I was going through Twitter and I saw this small video on the Twitter account of UNHCR, and there was this lady with, I think, 6 or 7 children, had newly come to Turkey, moved into a refugee camp, and she was, first of all, she was crying, and I tried to read the subtitles because it was in Arabic, and She said, you know, we're grateful for the Turkish, you know, people for letting us come here and so on, but this is not my home, and I want to go back. So regardless of the conditions that you provide for them, they want to go back home because this is not their country. See, these are, I just chose several of them. You see how big they are. We've been housing them, as I said, for over 4.5, 5 years. Every 30 seconds, a Syrian child becomes a refugee. You see these children in the camps. We try to make their life as easy as possible. We provide them education. We don't want them to not be able to live their life that they would be living regularly if there was no war. I was just explaining to some of the ladies today during lunch that, you know, you see sports, activities. Schooling is a very important issue. The Los Angeles World Affairs Consul, I think a month or a month and a half ago, they had the head of the UNHCR, UNICEF of Lebanon. He came to speak about how children in Lebanon are affected by the Syrian civil war. And he was saying that, you know, the kids today that are between 9 and 15 will be obviously the future generation of Syria that will rebuild Syria. And he was saying that some of them had not been in school for the past 5 years. The girls at the age of 12, or when they become 12 or 13, the parents want to marry the kids to fairly wealthy Lebanese men so that they would get dowry, thank you. Another word that I just can't say. Dowry, so that they can pay their rent off. And Turkey has paid special importance, has attributed special importance for the education of the children so that there is no lost generation. And we are granting access to primary and secondary education. And school enrollment rate in protection centers is 90%, whereas the enrollment rate for children outside camps is around 30%. Well, you know, I said 2.2 million kids, Syrians are living in Turkey. Around 270,000 of them are living in these camps. The rest are living around in Turkey. We provide them with medical, as I said, facilities. We've built all these hospitals for them, but of course we're lacking Arabic-speaking doctors because our people don't speak Arabic and our languages are fundamentally different. So it's always difficult to help them out. So either the mother is there to help out with her very basic knowledge of Turkish, or we're trying to train our doctors so that they learn very basic level of Arabic so that they can treat the patients or provide education for the kids. We're providing vocational training for grown-ups so that when they go back to Syria, they can do something with their lives. You know, of course, we're educating the mothers because the mothers raise the family, they raise the kids. It's very important to educate the mothers. I guess most of you know this photo. Actually the whole world learned about the Syrian refugee crisis. You know, I was doing this PowerPoint yesterday night, my sister is visiting, and she said, don't put this. I said, I have to put this because this is a turning point in, I think, the fate of Syria. Because most people saw this and they said, oh my God, what's going on in Syria? This is a small Kurdish boy. His body was washed up the shores of Turkey. Now you can see the statistics here and how they have increased from 2014 January to June 2015. You see the refugees and migrants arriving by sea in Europe, and you can see the comparison over 1-year period. Where are they going? To Europe mainly, of course. Margaret just asked the question while we were having dinner, and she said, because I was explaining to her that I worked in the European Union Department and I have a master's on European integration. And she said, well, what's the reaction of the European Union? Well, I said it's a mixed reaction. Germany, for example, they generously said that we'd have 800,000, we'd accept up to 800,000 Syrians, whereas Hungary started building fences. So there is not a uniform approach in Europe. Those who are lucky they're in Hamburg, in Germany. Those who are lucky get to go on a plane. Those who are not get to go on this. And this is the end result. And that's the kid that you just saw a couple of slides ago. So there is this humanitarian crisis on several different levels. What needs to be done? I came back to this because what needs to be done? First of all, we need to address the Syrian issue as the international community in a uniform and unitary manner. When we give mixed signals to Syria, certain forces in Syria benefit from it. If, for example, the United States, this is not mine, if the United States is saying something and if Russia is saying something else, then there are forces within Syria that benefit from it. So we have to address this issue as the international community all together and speaking the same language to the Assad regime. We have to have, as I said in the beginning, a comprehensive political solution. It's important to, of course, address the issue of ISIS. You know, a month ago there was a terrorist attack in Ankara, at our capital, in the middle of the city. 102 people died in Ankara. Over 200-something civilians were injured. The day before the Paris attacks last week, in Lebanon, I don't know how many of you followed it, unfortunately it was not too much on the news, again a bomb exploded in Beirut, in the capital of Lebanon. 50 plus people died. And then a day later, you see that in France, in Paris, multiple terrorist attacks where 152 people died and several hundreds of people were wounded. So no one is immune to the terrorist threat. Yesterday I was just watching KTLA at 10 and there was a news saying that, you know, a plane departing from LAX had to land in Salt Lake City because there was a bomb threat. So what we have to do is act in unity and address this issue. But it's not only about ISIS, because when you look at what Assad has been doing, not a single Syrian army, a Syrian soldier has not
shoot the gun.
Shot a single bullet, thank you, whoever said that, shot a single bullet, thank you, has not shot a single bullet towards ISIS. So these people are working together. So it's important to address this issue and find a political solution to this, which actually there are several frameworks to this, because I myself participated in the Geneva I and the Geneva II meetings where a framework was established. Just last week in Vienna, your Secretary of State, my foreign minister as we call it back home in Turkey, got together, and several other countries, foreign ministers of several other countries, and they again drafted a framework for the political transition in Syria. But it's important. And another thing, of course, it's important to address the issue in such a manner that there is no misinterpretation. Otherwise, when there's a framework, everyone goes back home and they say, well, we thought we agreed to do this. They're like, oh no, but the way we agreed is this. So people have to be on the same page. This is where we have to start from. And we must also know that this is not an issue only that concerns Syrians, which is very far away from you. We have a 611-mile border with Syria, very long and unfortunately very porous border. But this is an issue that affects all of us. And I was not very happy to see today in the newspapers that actually America was going to accept, the US was going to accept up to 10,000 Syrian refugees this year. But in the Congress it was decided to halt it because, you know, they said, well, we don't know if some of the refugees are potential terrorists. We shouldn't let certain terrorist attacks or certain people that actually have this particular intention of doing this prevail. We must all be sensitive towards this issue and do what we can. We were just discussing today as regards to the cooperation between our universities and so on, and Margaret came up with an idea, said, you know, we have a nursing school, would they be able to help? You know, everyone should think, how can we help these people? I'm here, look, I'm the Consul General of Turkey, okay? I could have been doing a presentation about the tourism in Turkey, or how great my country is. The reason why I'm doing this, first of all, it was my first posting, and I left half of my heart there in Syria. I have friends, some of them that have passed away because of all the things that have been going on. But this is also a humanitarian issue, and we're all human beings. And we have to be very sensitive towards this issue. So I'm going to stop here. If you have any questions, go ahead. Everyone's speechless. Sure.
If the refugees come across to another continent, isn't there a better likelihood if you're closer in Europe and Lebanon, Iraq, Iran there, that they're going to get back to their own home rather than if they're in New Mexico and North America? Isn't there a better chance that they're going to actually be getting back to their own home than if they're in the United States?
Well,
it's on a whole other continent?
Yeah, well, it depends on the conditions that you accept them. If you're accepting them and saying, well, they're going to go back, obviously they will be going back. But I think, you know, there was a lot of news there were a lot of articles in the newspapers and in the media saying that, you know, the European Union wants to buy off Turkey by giving Turkey $3 trillion and letting the refugees stay in their zone. This is not the way to act, frankly speaking. But, well, it depends on your politicians, and it depends on how you perceive this issue. If you want to contribute by accepting Syrians, and you know, I'm looking around, you have such a diverse community here. What makes America strong is the fact that people coming from all different parts of the world can peacefully coexist. And this is one of the things that I have admired most in America. But of course, that is a choice that your politicians will be making. Ma'am, go ahead.
Dr. Mary Ann Schultz, Department of Nursing Chair.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi, you showed us a distribution of people leaving, being displaced.
Mm-hmm.
And then you showed us, I think it was a map that showed us where they were arriving in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about what are the factors that determine where they land? So it would be proximity, it would be transportation, unfortunately, in
Mm-hmm.
some of the sadder pictures.
Sure.
And it would be the perceived friendliness then of the receiving nation. So tell us a little bit about the factors, including word of mouth, that would influence where a person arrives.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know what, they're, frankly speaking, at the moment, they're just fleeing for their lives. So I don't think most of them have a grand plan in their mind saying, oh, I'm going to go there today and, you know, and I don't know, and live in this specific country. Most of them are just trying to get out of Syria. And the way they're doing it, they're going from Turkey or from Egypt. Most of them are landing, we're seeing a lot in the news now, they go from Turkey to the Lesbos island and then to Greece. And if they don't have any fences that don't let them go in, then they try to go to Europe and all around. Some of them, they have relatives somewhere that live. Some of them, as you said, Matthew, where they've heard from some people saying, oh, you know, there are good business opportunities in this country, in that country, and of course in the European Union. This was a huge debate, actually, in the last couple of months. And that's why I said that the European Union countries don't have a uniform approach towards this. They were discussing how to tackle this issue. And they couldn't really reach a solution. So each country said, okay, you know, I'm going to address this issue more or less on my own. And that's why, for example, Germany said, okay, we're going to get up to 800,000 Syrians, and Hungary closed their borders. Go ahead, sir.
I'm Cameron Sanchez. I'm one of the teachers who actually got to go to Turkey this summer.
Great.
It was interesting. The day we landed, or the day after we landed, is when one of the bombings occurred in southeast Turkey. And so we might be a little reticent to go right now. It's a fabulous trip in. But what I wanted to ask is, how would you suggest the United States and our politicians and so forth help allay some of the concerns that are running rampant right now about bringing in refugees from Syria to the United States in terms of the education aspect? What would you suggest or do if you had control of this to say, hey guys, here's the way you should look at it?
Well, I know that your politicians in Washington are very well staffed. They have staffers to look into this business. So I'm sure they're feeding them with the appropriate information. But it's about willingness, and it's a policy matter. I wouldn't know what to say about your internal politics, frankly speaking. Yeah. Domestic politics, internal politics, we say that in Europe. Domestic politics in the States.
One of the things I've heard about and understood a little bit is the original crisis in Syria began with a drought and with things like climate change and with farmers having been driven off their land, and that became part of the initial impetus towards the rebellion against the Assad regime. And I'm wondering, you know, how big is that now, or have other events overtaken those initial impetus for civil war that started off?
Well, even if it evolved if it started from that point, I think it has evolved into something completely different now. And Syria did have a drought, and the irrigation system is very, very bad because we have two rivers that we share. We are a littoral state as regards to those rivers, and this was one of the topics that I was covering when I was back in Syria. Their irrigation network is very, very weak, bad constructed. So even if they have water, they weren't able to use it then. Now, God knows what happened. But another thing is that because they were mostly a socialist republic, you would be able to find vegetables for a very cheap price in certain shops. People were happy in Syria when I left Syria. Those who were less fortunate, those who were not happy were the educated ones that had been to the West and had seen the way the West, people were living in the Western countries. Selena.
My name is Selena, and as far as I know, the international treaties do not allow the countries to return the asylum seekers or people whose lives are in danger in their own countries. So if there is, let's say, a person that came to my border and that person will be killed going back to their country, I'm going to have to open my doors to them. So this is the case in Europe right now. So building fences is just absurd because these people are fleeing their countries because their lives are in danger. But there is Europe, I think Germany is trying to find a solution to this, to send them back someplace. They can't send them back to Syria. And so what is being done right now for all the people that are already in Europe and they can't go back to their countries and they're not being accepted?
Well, first of all, there's a difference between an asylum seeker and a refugee. An asylum seeker is a person that, for example, has fled their country because of political persecution. So asylum seeker is a little bit, the status of both of them, according to international treaties, they're different. What Europe has the reaction Europe gave was, you know, let's, as I said, they offered Turkey $3 billion saying, you know, we'll provide you money. By the way, Turkey until today has spent $8 billion on the Syrian refugees. And we've only received $500 million from the international community. Thank you for reminding me. But what Europe said was, you know, we'll give you these $3 billion, keep it, and keep the Syrian refugees. But what we're saying is that it's not about money anymore. And everyone, all the international community has to share the burden. And they themselves are not fleeing to Europe. So I don't know how each country is handling that, because as I've said, they don't have a specific approach towards. They were not able to establish a formulate or a specific approach towards that. Some countries are more, say, generous. The other ones categorically are rejecting them. But asylum seeker, no. Normally you shouldn't, according to international law. But refugees, that's something different. And every country is addressing it in a different way. And people are really, I must admit this, I have Syrian friends living here in Southern California. They're disillusioned. Because 2-3 years ago, they had the hope that, you know, something was going to change in their country. Most of them, they're like, this is not going to change. And the fact that they're disillusioned really upsets me a lot. Because they don't have faith in the international community. They don't have faith in the people already left in Syria. How could they? So this is, I think it's also the message we're giving, you know. When we said, if you allow me, when we said this is an important thing that I would like to emphasize here, well, you know, most of us, we saluted the Arab Spring. We said, finally, democracy is coming to the Middle East. And what happened, for example, in Egypt, Mubarak was toppled down. Then the Muslim Brotherhood came. Like it or not, there was elections. They chose Muslim Brotherhood. A year later, just a year later, they said, no, we're not going to give this guy more chance, Morsi. So he was toppled down, and Abdel Fattah al-Sisi came. So I just want to ask a question. What is the difference between Mubarak and Sisi? What kind of a message are we giving to the Egyptian people? What kind of a message are we giving to the Arab people that want change in their countries? So are we pro-stability or are we pro-democracy? Now, the Syrians are not stupid people. They also see this. So they say, regardless of how much we revolt against this, you know, the international reaction is not going to be the same.
Yes, my name is Art Concepcion. You said at the beginning the solution is that everybody should have one language and one approach to the problem. How can we do that when Russia and the United States, which are the leading superpowers, are not in unison? And we are relinquishing our, our influence in the region to the Russians, which clearly doesn't support, the removal of Assad in Syria, and they're supporting ISIS.
Well, this is not a new phenomenon. During the Cold War period, it was the same. Russia was on one camp in the Soviet satellite states, and there was America and NATO, of course, on one camp. This is nothing new. But what we're seeing now is a much huger scale of humanitarian crisis and human loss of human lives. And frankly speaking, it's good that you brought it up. And ISIS shot down or put a bomb in a Russian plane, which shows that, again, you're not immune to terrorism, regardless of which side you're on. I'm sure that the leaders of both countries will come to an agreement. We had, just in Antalya, in the Mediterranean, we have the city of Antalya, which is a Mediterranean resort. We had the G20 summit last week. And I was happy to see that Obama and Putin, they sat down at the lobby of one of the hotels and they spoke for half an hour. That's what they have to be doing. And I hope they will find a solution, because without the US and Russia being on the same page, it's very difficult to find a solution.
First of all, let me say how much I enjoyed your presentation. It has to be very unique to have
experiences in both Syria and Turkey to speak with both of those voices so knowledgeably. I have two questions, and let's see if we have time. I'll make them as brief as I can. Number one, my math isn't my strong point. You can laugh here, but it sounded to me like 90% of the refugees in Turkey are not in your beautiful, amazing refugee camp. Is that by people's choice? Or if there aren't more places available in the refugee camp?
And can I get your second question as well?
Oh, okay. The second question is, I'm an educator, and I was just very pleased to see that you are working with children, primary, secondary education, and with parents. You said you were dealing with vocational education. The news we get through the media is that most of the refugees from Syria are highly educated. Would you consider that to be true or not?
Actually, your second question answers your first question. The highly educated ones don't want to be in the refugee camps because they have the money to go and rent a house or live in big cities. So those who are relatively well off go, and the Alawites, or the Nusayris as we call them, we have also a lot of Alawites living in the southern part of Turkey, and they somehow all have relatives because we have centuries-long history together. So they go to outside the refugee camps to their relatives, I don't know, houses, or they rent houses, or they go to Istanbul and so on. So those are the educated ones. But the uneducated ones that have lost everything and they don't have anything. We see people that are coming with what they have on them, you know, and they have to be in those camps, and they are the ones that obviously need education. Ma'am, you have a question?
I'm wondering, first of all, I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you so much, especially the talk about how much the Turkey has been doing for the Syrian people. And earlier you mentioned like how we all, oh sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
I was hearing you before.
All right, thank you. Yeah, earlier you were mentioning that you hope that we all will be able to do something for the refugee, for the Syrian people. I think all of us here, we are either faculty members at the university or students or administrators. So I'm wondering what specific things that you have in mind or that you could suggest us to do as a community.
Well, there are international organizations, UN, UNICEF, UNHCR. There are Syrian Red Crescent, which is Red Cross in our parts of the world. You have Red Crescent, you have Red Cross, World Food Program, food organization. So you have all these international bodies that are actually doing a lot for the refugee crisis, not only in Turkey, but also in Lebanon, and in Iraq, in Jordan. You can help via them. Or there are Syrian organizations here, the Syrian Institute for Progress, Syrian American Medical Society, SAMS. These are these institutions that are helping out their brethren back home, trying to help out their brethren back home. So if you have any such intention, you can get in touch with them. Salam Bey, I will give the priority to the young lady. Go ahead.
My question is regarding however the conflict ends one way or another. My question is regarding, I was hoping you could tell us Turkey's position on what the hopeful outcome is for the power structure potential in Syria. Who is Turkey's position for the hopeful outcome of the conflict?
Good question. Thank you. Well, as time is passing, because what we have been saying from the beginning is to keep the institutions intact. Because if you also lose institutions, then you have to build Syria from scratch. But as time is passing, we're seeing that those institutions are also being disrupted. So to have a political solution, a political transition for a couple of months, to go to elections, keeping the institutions intact, and having a government that is inclusive, which means because Syria is not a homogeneous society. They have Sunni Arabs, they have the Alawites, they have the Kurds, they have the Turkomans, they have the Christians. So it must be a government that includes all different parts of Syria. It must be representative of the Syrian people. But it's also very difficult to find a Syrian opposition for this, because some of them are Sunni Arabs that are against the Alawites. Some of the Christians are now aligning with Assad because they fear that there will be like Sharia law or something if Assad leaves. And Assad is using that very cleverly against the Christians. And there are, of course, the Kurds. The Kurds during this, before the civil war, they were haymatlos, which means they were haymatlos in English would mean they didn't have any legal documents. They were non-existent, let's say. They did not belong to Syria, so they could not go to school because the kids didn't have IDs and so on. So it must include the Kurds as well, an inclusive government. It's not going to be easy, but it could be done. You know, I wrote a thesis on how Europe could induce Syria to become a more democratic society, and how that would help the Middle East peace process. And I had argued in my thesis, which was in the library. Today, if I wrote the same thesis, they would just rip it and, you know, just put it in the trash can, I guess, but I got a good grade on that. I worked a lot. But I had argued that if there would be democracy in the Middle East, most people would say it's Egypt. I argued that it was Syria, because the population is low, highly educated people, as Madam has said, and they're Mediterranean, open people, secular people. They were, I don't know the conditions now, but I still have hope. I think they can still pull it off, but we have to help them, because they can't obviously do it on their own. Salam Afwan.
My question is, the refugee crisis has been ongoing for some 5 years.
Yes.
What caused the flooding of the gates a month ago? What triggered the flooding? I mean, you know, there are millions of people going to Europe suddenly.
Yeah, well, the Assad forces have been striking back against the moderates. So, and actually, we've seen that some countries have been helping the Assad forces via their airstrikes. So that they have the airstrikes, and then the Assad forces, the land forces, are moving and pushing people towards the north. And of course, in the north, there is ISIS. And they cut everyone's throat. They don't care. They have terrorist attacks in Turkey. 3 years ago, they kidnapped our consul general in Mosul, where you are from. And the whole staff, 41 people, were kidnapped for, I never know why you say kidnapped, but they were kidnapped for over 90 days. So these people don't know any boundaries. So ISIS is becoming more and more dominant in the north. So they've come to a point that they can no longer tolerate this, and they cannot find food. So it's the pushing of the Assad forces with the help of other countries that triggered the mass migration.
Really interesting and really moving presentation, faculty. I was just curious, you know, for example, let's imagine if I'm a migrant from Syria, right, and I have a family, and I go to Turkey, right? So am I going to stay there forever, and what's the response from the Turkey government? Am I going to work? Like, what's the connectivity? How do, if you are from, say, Turkey, and how are you going to react with me as I'm a Syrian, I'm an immigrant, like a refugee coming to your country for shelter. So what's the, relationship, and, how do people treat if I'm a refugee, okay, you're coming from Syria. So are they having any biases, or I'm going to work, am I allowed to work there or not?
Well, some of you that have been to Turkey know that we are very hospitable people, first of all. And the Syrians, we have culturally a lot in common. In the beginning, of course, no one knew that this was going to last this long. long, and in the foreseeable future, we can't see a solution to this. So we have granted them the right to work, because they need to work. And as I've said, we've provided education for them. And as regards to university education, well, they pass a simpler test that we have a general university exam that everyone has to go into, and according to the points you get, you apply to universities around Turkey. And they are granted an easier version of that test, and if they manage to pass that test, then they can also go to universities in Turkey. So we have provided them some rights because they have been living in Turkey for some time, but we haven't granted them, of course, citizenship, because that is taking it to a completely different level, and I think the government is still processing that. We have to see how everything is going, because 2.2 million people, it's quite a big number of people. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
I think we have received all that this woman could give. We started her off this morning about 11:30, and she has been on talking and thinking and sharing at a very deep level the whole time. They're grateful as well. And I hope you all understand, she has been working with the university to develop partnerships. She's been working with the community to develop business partnerships. And so she is a real friend of our region, and should be honored for that. And I'm really excited.
Honored to be here.